Hello, esteemed gentlemen. Inside every man lives two wolves, but in the Sigma male one is praying in silence while the other is sharpening his blade. For centuries, history has shown us men who lived double lives, warrior philosophers, generals who meditated before battle, monks who trained with weapons they swore never to use. Neuroscientists even confirm the human brain can run contradictory modes of thought at the same time: calm reflection and ruthless calculation. Nowhere is this paradox more alive than in the Sigma male. He's not just a loner with deep thoughts. He is both the monk who retreats into silence and the mercenary who knows how to weaponize that silence when the world turns hostile. One half of him is untouched by society's noise. The other half is perfectly trained to strike back when society gets too close. It's a dangerous, fascinating mix, like finding a monk meditating on top of a mountain, only to realize he's sitting on a hidden arsenal. And if you think that sounds exaggerated, spend 5 minutes around a Sigma male. 1 second he's sipping coffee in Zen-like calm. The next he's dismantling a manipulator's entire strategy with a single sentence. This is the double life every Sigma male lives within one body: the monk and the mercenary, the saint and the strategist, the refuge and the storm. And today, we're going to expose exactly how these two halves coexist without ever cancelling each other out. Number 1. He lives in the present, but plans for collapse. He lives in the present, but plans for collapse. That's one of the most unnerving contradictions about a Sigma male. On the surface, he seems calm, grounded, even detached. He's not racing after tomorrow or chained to yesterday. He can sit with himself, enjoy silence, savor the taste of his food, or walk in a room without needing to conquer it. That's the monk side. But beneath that stillness is a mercenary's brain that never stops scanning for cracks in the foundation. While others are caught up in their daily distractions, he's quietly rehearsing what happens when everything falls apart. It's not paranoia, it's preparation. He doesn't panic about collapse because he's already accepted it as inevitable. Friendships will fracture, systems will fail, empires will fall. Even technology, power or love, none of it is guaranteed. He knows peace is only ever temporary, so while he enjoys the now, he is also storing mental blueprints for what to do when the now turns to chaos. That's why people often mistake him for cold or detached, because while they're busy clinging to the comfort of stability, he's already rehearsed life without it. This is why Sigma males often appear unshaken when everyone else is falling apart. When a crisis erupts, others scramble to adapt, but he's already there, 3 moves ahead. The monk in him allows him to sit still, unbothered by noise, while the mercenary calculates which direction to pivot when the ground gives way. It's a split existence, and it's exhausting to most people, but for him, it's second nature. He doesn't need to talk about it. He just does it. And here's where it gets unsettling. He's not just planning for his own survival, he's mapping out how others will react too. Who will crumble? Who will betray? Who will still stand firm? He runs those simulations in silence while everyone assumes he's just lost in thought. That's the danger. They confuse his stillness for emptiness, not realizing it's actually a war room in disguise. Living in the present while preparing for collapse makes him untouchable. He enjoys life without being enslaved by it. He's not addicted to stability because he's already trained himself to outlive its destruction. That's what makes him both impossible to defeat and impossible to fully understand. Number 2, he's both the storm and the refuge. He's both the storm and the refuge. That's the paradox that makes a Sigma male so difficult to read and even harder to handle. On one side, he has the capacity to be a shelter, someone whose presence feels grounding, safe, and strangely calming. People are often drawn to him not because he tries to pull them in, but because he radiates the kind of self-possession that makes others feel protected just by being near him. This is the monk at work, the part of him that understands pain, discipline, and the need for quiet strength. He doesn't chase approval or validation, and that gives him the ability to be a safe harbor for those who are drowning in the chaos of their own lives. But the same man who offers that calm can also unleash the storm, and when he does, it's rarely loud or chaotic in the conventional sense. The mercenary in him doesn't fight recklessly, he fights surgically. His storm is precise, cutting, and devastating to anyone who threatens his principles, his independence, or the few people he actually values. To those on the receiving end, it feels like being caught in a hurricane you never saw coming. One moment he is still, unshakable, and the next, he's dismantling your ego, exposing your lies, or turning your manipulations against you. This duality is what unsettles people the most. They can't categorize him because he's not just one thing. To some, he's the most trustworthy presence they've ever met. Calm, steady, almost monk-like in his detachment. To others, he's the most dangerous adversary they've ever encountered, because he doesn't fight out of impulse, but out of principle, and when he strikes, he leaves no room for recovery. That's what makes him unpredictable. You never know whether you'll get the sanctuary or the storm. What makes this even more powerful is that he doesn't switch between the two for attention. He's not acting. Both sides are equally real, equally alive inside him. The monk teaches him how to preserve, the mercenary teaches him how to destroy, and together they make him someone who can be both healer and executioner in the same body. That balance is what makes him unforgettable. Number 3, he lives by principles. He's willing to break. He lives by principles he's willing to break. And that's what separates him from men who pretend to be moral only until the first real test arrives. For the Sigma male, the monk builds a code that keeps him steady, values that act as his compass when the world tries to push him into chaos. Discipline, honesty with himself, respect for his independence, and fairness where it's deserved. These principles aren't for show. He doesn't parade them to earn approval. They are what allow him to look in the mirror without flinching. But the mercenary inside him understands something brutal. Principles mean nothing if they make you weak, predictable, or easy to control. So while he lives by a code, he doesn't worship it blindly. If the choice is between sticking to a rule and surviving, he'll break it without hesitation. If the situation demands deception, he won't choke on some noble fantasy about always telling the truth. If mercy today means giving power to someone who will stab him tomorrow, then mercy gets discarded. His morality bends when reality demands it, but never in a way that makes him lose himself. That's the paradox. This dual nature makes him both trustworthy and terrifying. People rely on him because he has a sense of honor, but they also fear him because they know that if you cross a certain line, he will abandon that same honor to make sure he wins. That tension is what keeps him untouchable. Nobody can ever quite predict how far he's willing to go. The world often demands men choose between being righteous or ruthless. The Sigma refuses that binary. He embodies both. He's righteous enough to create a code worth living by, but ruthless enough to break it when it chains him to failure. That balance is not hypocrisy. It's survival with intelligence, and it's exactly why he's both respected and feared. A man who can live by principles, but never be imprisoned by them. Number 4, he can be both invisible and unforgettable. He can be both invisible and unforgettable, and that's one of the strangest contradictions about the Sigma male. The monk in him has no appetite for applause. He doesn't need the spotlight, the recognition, or the constant reminder that he exists. In fact, he finds comfort in being overlooked because it allows him to live freely, without the expectations and chains that come with visibility. He can walk into a room and vanish into the background, not because he's timid, but because he chooses not to perform for anyone's approval. But the mercenary understands something the monk doesn't have to explain. Invisibility isn't just peace, it's power. To not be noticed is to not be anticipated. To blend in is to make yourself a ghost until the exact moment you decide otherwise. That's why invisibility becomes his greatest tactical advantage. No one is prepared for him because they didn't even realize he was there in the first place. It's the equivalent of keeping a sword hidden until the last possible second. When it finally comes out, it's already too late. And that's where the unforgettable side emerges. The same man who blends into silence can, in a single moment, disrupt the entire balance of a situation. It might be a sentence that exposes a liar, a decision that turns the tide of a conflict, or an action that nobody saw coming but can't stop replaying in their minds. He doesn't aim for shock value, but because he's been so quiet, his impact lands with twice the force. The contrast between his invisibility and his action burns itself into memory. That's why people underestimate him until it's too late. They think he's harmless because he's silent. They think he's forgettable because he avoids the spotlight. Then he acts, and the impression he leaves behind is carved so deeply that people can't erase it, no matter how much they try. This is the Sigma's paradox. The man who can vanish without trace is also the man you'll never be able to forget once he decides to leave his mark. That combination makes him both the shadow in the corner and the story you'll be telling long after he's gone. Number 5. He cultivates stillness. Like others, cultivate violence. He cultivates stillness like others cultivate violence, and that's what makes him unnerving in a way fists and fury never could. For the monk within him, stillness is sacred. It's a way of cleansing the mind from noise, a way to return to clarity when the world is chaotic. It's not laziness, and it's not passivity. It's deliberate discipline. Stillness gives him control over himself, and that control becomes the foundation of every decision he makes. While others waste energy reacting to every impulse, he sits unmoved, gaining strength from restraint. But the mercenary in him understands that stillness isn't only for peace, it's a weapon. In a world where people are addicted to overreaction, nothing is more unsettling than a man who doesn't flinch. While others shout, scramble, or lose their composure, he remains calm, and that calm becomes a mirror reflecting the chaos of everyone else. His stillness makes enemies doubt themselves. They wonder, why isn't he panicking? What does he know that we don't? That silence creates psychological pressure, and the longer he holds it, the more it cracks others from the inside. This is why his presence often feels heavier than words or actions. He doesn't need to prove dominance by flexing aggression, because his refusal to be shaken does more damage than a raised voice or clenched fist ever could. Stillness forces people to confront their own noise, their own fear, their own lack of control. It exposes how easily they are manipulated by their emotions. And when he does move, when he finally decides to act, the impact is multiplied because it comes from a place of restraint. Others burn out by throwing their energy into every conflict. He conserves his until it matters most, and when it's unleashed, it's devastating precisely because it was held back for so long. Stillness, for him, is not weakness, it's mastery. He uses it as a shield, as a meditation, and as a weapon. The monk calls it purity, the mercenary calls it psychological warfare. But in the end, it's the same truth. A man who cannot be moved is more terrifying than a man who is always on the attack. Number 6. He trusts no one but learns from everyone. He trusts no one but learns from everyone. And that balance is what keeps the Sigma male untouchable. The monk in him sees value in every encounter. He believes that every human being, no matter how flawed, carries a lesson, whether it's in how they succeed, how they fail, or how they betray themselves with their own words. He doesn't dismiss people, even when they seem shallow or foolish, because he knows even a fool can reveal truths a wise man overlooks. This mindset allows him to absorb knowledge constantly, like a student who never graduates from the classroom of life. But the mercenary in him refuses to confuse learning with trusting. Trust, to him, is the most dangerous currency. It makes men predictable, manipulable, and vulnerable. He's seen how blind loyalty destroys people, how misplaced faith gives power to the wrong hands. So he withdraws his trust like a fortress draws its bridge, never lowering it just because someone smiles or makes promises. He won't hand over his secrets, his vulnerabilities, or his loyalty unless there's a reason beyond sentiment. That's what makes him so frustrating to others. They feel him listening, studying, understanding them at a depth most people never reach, yet he remains impenetrable. They pour out their stories, their mistakes, their ambitions, and he takes it all in, but when they look for reciprocity, they find walls instead of doors. He is a collector of truths, not a trader of them, and that's where his power lies. Because he learns from everyone without depending on anyone, he becomes adaptable in a way others aren't. He can predict betrayal because he's studied it in others. He can anticipate weakness because he's catalogued it in silence. He builds his arsenal not with weapons, but with observations. And those observations become leverage. This duality means he's never naive, but also never arrogant enough to think he can't learn. He knows that even his enemy can be his teacher. But while he takes the lesson, he never gives the enemy the satisfaction of holding his trust. That makes him both student and survivor, always gaining wisdom, never forfeiting control. Number 7, he can starve without begging. He can starve without begging, and that is one of the most brutal demonstrations of strength a Sigma male carries. The monk in him is naturally detached from excess. He doesn't need constant stimulation, material comforts, or endless rewards to feel complete. If life strips him down to the bare minimum, he won't collapse in bitterness or self-pity. He accepts simplicity as a test of character. He can go without, and instead of complaining, he uses that deprivation to sharpen his sense of discipline. The less he has, the freer he becomes from the chains of dependency. The mercenary side of him takes that same endurance and turns it into strategy. Starvation, whether physical, emotional, or psychological, is a tool. He pushes himself to withstand hunger, loneliness, and even loss because every moment of endurance builds a kind of inner armor others don't have. By denying himself what others crave, he trains himself to never appear desperate, and in a world that thrives on exploiting desperation, that makes him untouchable. No one can manipulate him with promises, bribes, or temptations, because he's already proven to himself he can live without them. This creates a presence that unsettles people. Most men show their hunger in obvious ways: the need for attention, validation, love, power, or resources. The Sigma hides his, or rather, he dissolves it before anyone else can see it. When others try to corner him by withholding something, they realize too late that he doesn't bend the way they expect. He won't beg, he won't crawl, and he won't surrender just to fill a temporary void. That refusal to beg makes him dangerous. It means he can outlast manipulators, endure the droughts, and stand firm when others break. His silence during deprivation isn't weakness, it's psychological warfare. By never revealing his hunger, he forces others to question their own. And when they can't bear it, when they fold under the weight of their cravings, he remains steady, proving that the man who can starve without begging is the man who cannot be owned. For him, starvation isn't suffering, It's mastery. It's not just about food or resources. It's about proving that nothing outside himself truly controls him. Number 8. He kills illusions. Before he kills enemies, he kills illusions before he kills enemies, and that's what makes a Sigma male far more dangerous than someone who relies only on brute force. The monk in him begins with himself. He refuses to live chained to lies, excuses, or self-delusions. He strips away the stories most people tell themselves for comfort, the belief that they're always right, that life is fair, or that they can control everything around them. By destroying those illusions within, he becomes immune to the traps that cripple others. He doesn't waste time clinging to false hope or inflating his ego. His inner clarity gives him a stability most men never reach. The mercenary in him takes this principle outward. He doesn't just fight enemies with fists or words. He dismantles their illusions first. He studies the confidence they wear, the masks they build, and the fragile beliefs they depend on to feel powerful. Then, without needing to raise his voice or strike a blow, he punctures those illusions with precision. He knows that once a person's false sense of control or superiority collapses, their fight is already over. The body may still stand, but the spirit is gone. This is why people find him unnerving. He doesn't need to humiliate you publicly to destroy you. He can unravel your certainty with a single observation, a sentence that reveals the truth you are trying to hide even from yourself. And once that truth is exposed, you're left disarmed, because there's no defense against reality. By killing illusions first, he conserves his energy. He doesn't waste time battling the surface when he can go straight for the foundation. An enemy who loses faith in their own strength is easier to topple than one who still believes in their invincibility. That's why when he finally chooses to act, his enemies often crumble before the real fight even begins. What makes this terrifying is that he doesn't rush. He lets people live in their illusions until the exact moment it serves him to take them away. And when he does, the silence that follows is louder than any war cry. Because once your illusions are gone, you're already defeated, and he hasn't even drawn his blade yet. Number 9. He practices forgiveness without forgetting. He practices forgiveness without forgetting, and that's where the Sigma male's strength becomes both unsettling and liberating. The monk within him knows that holding on to bitterness is like drinking poison and expecting someone else to die. Resentment corrodes peace, and peace is something he refuses to sacrifice. So he forgives, not because the other person deserves it, but because he refuses to let them live rent-free in his head. Forgiveness, for him, is a way to remain light, unburdened, and free from the emotional weight that chains most people to their past. But forgiveness doesn't mean erasure. The mercenary in him is ruthless about memory. Every betrayal, every lie, every manipulation is carefully logged in the back of his mind, like entries in a private archive. He doesn't dwell on them emotionally, but he keeps them there, cold and intact, waiting for the right moment. To him, forgetting would be foolish. It would mean allowing the same wound to be opened twice. He has no interest in martyrdom, so while he lets go of the sting, he never lets go of the lesson. This duality makes him impossible to manipulate. People who wrong him might believe they've been absolved, because he doesn't carry the visible anger most men would. They mistake his calm for naivety, thinking he has moved on completely. What they don't realize is that he remembers with clarity sharper than anger ever could. And when the time comes, whether for protection, retaliation, or leverage, he knows exactly where to press. It's not about revenge for him. Revenge is noisy, predictable, and often self-destructive. His approach is more strategic. By practicing forgiveness, he avoids the obsession that consumes others. By never forgetting, he keeps the power of choice. He can decide when, if ever, to act. This makes his presence both comforting and terrifying. To those he values, his forgiveness brings peace and stability. To those who cross him, his memory is a silent warning that never fades. The Sigma male forgives to stay pure, but he never forgets because forgetting is the luxury of fools. And that balance is what keeps him both unburdened and untouchable. Number 10. He can disappear without dying. He can disappear without dying, and that's one of the most haunting qualities of the Sigma male. For the monk within him, vanishing is not an act of despair but of preservation. He values solitude the way others value applause. When life becomes too loud, too draining, or too shallow, he simply withdraws, not as a punishment to others, but as a way of returning to himself. He doesn't fear being alone, because in his eyes, solitude isn't emptiness. It's oxygen. He can cut off the noise of the world and sit with his own thoughts without spiraling into loneliness. That makes his disappearances confusing to people who can't imagine life without constant connection. But the mercenary in him sees disappearance differently. For him, vanishing is not just peace, it's survival. The ability to remove himself from situations, from people, or from systems that no longer serve him is a weapon. Where others cling out of fear, fear of being forgotten, fear of losing relevance, fear of missing out, he slips away clean, leaving no trace for anyone to exploit. To the mercenary, visibility is vulnerability, and invisibility is protection. Disappearing means he cannot be tracked, used, or trapped. This ability to ghost unsettles people more than anything else. Most men would crumble if they were cut off from validation or attention. A Sigma doesn't. He doesn't beg to be remembered, doesn't fear silence, and doesn't need witnesses to confirm his worth. He can walk away from friendships, relationships, jobs, or entire social circles and feel no collapse inside himself. That kind of detachment is power others can't understand, because they measure their worth by how much they're seen, while he measures his by how well he can vanish without losing himself. And when he returns, if he chooses to, he's not the same man who left. His disappearances often become periods of transformation, of rebuilding, of strategizing. People who thought he was gone for good find themselves startled when he reappears sharper, stronger, and more unshakable than before. To disappear without dying is to master both presence and absence. It's a reminder that he doesn't need the world's gaze to exist fully. He owns himself, whether in the shadows or in the light, and that ownership is what makes him untouchable. Number 11. He chooses poverty to master wealth. He chooses poverty to master wealth, and that decision alone separates him from the majority of men. The monk in him strips life down to its bones on purpose. He avoids drowning in luxuries or chasing endless material rewards because he knows they corrupt faster than they comfort. By living with little, he reminds himself that his worth isn't tied to possessions or status symbols. Simplicity becomes his discipline. He trains his spirit to thrive without the distractions that enslave others. Poverty, in this sense, isn't suffering, it's freedom. It teaches him that he doesn't need the world's excess to survive, and that knowledge makes him unshakable. The mercenary, however, sees deprivation not just as freedom, but as strategy. He studies poverty the way others study wealth. He knows that the hunger for money, security, and luxury drives most human behavior. By experiencing deprivation himself, he learns exactly how desperation shapes people, how it can twist them, weaken them, or push them to betray their own principles. To him, poverty is an education, a harsh but powerful classroom that teaches him not only endurance, but also how to read and manipulate the cravings of others. This is what makes his relationship with wealth so different. He doesn't worship it. He doesn't run blindly after it. And because he doesn't depend on it for identity, money loses its ability to control him. You can't bribe a man who's proven he can live with nothing. You can't threaten him with loss when he's already trained himself to strip life down voluntarily. That independence is terrifying to people who believe wealth is the ultimate chain of power. Ironically, this is also what makes him more effective at building and managing wealth when he chooses to. Because he doesn't fear poverty, he takes risks others wouldn't dare. Because he understands deprivation, he sees the traps money lays for men who never learned restraint. Where others chase wealth only to become enslaved by it, he uses it as a tool, and only when it suits his mission. For the Sigma male, poverty is not defeat. It's training. It's the sharpening stone that keeps him from being owned by greed. And when a man has mastered poverty, he cannot be conquered by wealth. Number 12. He fights without raising his voice. He fights without raising his voice, and that is what makes his presence so unnerving. The monk in him avoids shouting because it strips away dignity. He sees no value in wasting energy through rage or tantrums, because losing control of his tongue is the same as losing control of himself. For him, silence isn't weakness, it's mastery. It allows him to stay centered when everyone else is busy flaring up, and that composure alone often ends conflicts before they even escalate. People expect anger to meet anger. When he doesn't play into that, they're left off balance. The mercenary in him takes this same calm and weaponizes it. He knows that shouting only reveals desperation, and desperation is a weakness enemies feed on. By refusing to raise his voice, he creates a pressure others can't explain. His opponents feel small because he doesn't give them the satisfaction of reaction. He wins by holding control, by forcing others to unravel under their own emotional outbursts while he stands steady. That psychological control is more destructive than any volume could ever be. His wars are fought in silence, gestures, and precision. A cutting remark delivered in a calm tone hits harder than 100 shouted insults. A quiet refusal can dismantle someone's ego more effectively than hours of screaming. And when he does take action, it's surgical, measured, intentional, and impossible to undo. He doesn't waste words, and he doesn't waste movements. This is why he unnerves both allies and enemies. Allies may expect loud reassurance, but instead they get a steady calm that grounds them in battle. Enemies may expect explosive retaliation, but they get cold precision that makes their chaos look childish. His silence isn't passive, it's strategic, and it gives him the element of unpredictability. To fight without raising your voice is to fight from a position of dominance. It signals control, intelligence, and a refusal to descend to the level of noise. The Sigma male doesn't need to roar to win his wars. He dismantles opponents with silence, leaving them realizing too late that they've been outplayed not by force, but by control. At the end of the day, the Sigma male is not simply a man who walks alone or chooses silence. That's a shallow interpretation. What makes him so different and so hard to define is the fact that he carries two lives within one body, the monk and the mercenary. These aren't roles he switches between for convenience. They are living forces inside him, coexisting in tension and harmony. The monk gives him clarity, discipline, and the strength to detach from illusions that trap weaker men. The mercenary sharpens him into a strategist, a survivor, and a man who knows how to wield ruthlessness without being consumed by it. It's this duality that makes him both terrifying and magnetic. He can be invisible when it serves him, but unforgettable when he acts. He can forgive without ever forgetting, vanish without emotional collapse, and cultivate stillness that unsettles even the loudest enemy. He can starve without begging, kill illusions before killing enemies, and live by principles he's willing to break when survival demands it. To some, this makes him unpredictable. To others, it makes him dangerous. But in truth, it makes him free. While the world demands men choose between being gentle or brutal, peaceful or aggressive, righteous or ruthless, the Sigma male refuses those binaries. He embodies both, sanctuary and storm, refuge and executioner. That's why he cannot be fully understood, categorized, or controlled. He moves in silence but leaves permanent impact. He carries principles yet bends them when the world turns hostile. He lives in the present but prepares for collapse. In every way, he is proof that the strongest men are not one-dimensional. They are contradictions sharpened into balance. And perhaps that's what unsettles people the most. The realization that a man doesn't have to choose between being holy or dangerous. He can be both. He can meditate and fight, forgive and remember, vanish and return stronger. The Sigma male embodies the paradox most men are too afraid to live. He is the monk and the mercenary, housed in one body, moving through a world that never truly knows what to expect of him. If you found value in this exploration of the Sigma male's double life, make sure to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss what's coming next. Don't forget to like, comment, and share this video with others who need to hear it. Your support keeps this journey alive, and trust me, you'll want to be here when we go even deeper into the minds of those who live beyond the ordinary.